Games are very varied in several ways. But at their core, most games, not all, but most games rely on a few shared simple mechanics. Roll dice. Dice determine either if you succeed or how well you succeed at a task. In some games, you have very few ways to use your dice. It's all about improvisation and roleplay. In other games, you have a ton of stuff to roll your dice with. Generally speaking, these are called skills. And I have not yet played a game with more dice and more skills than Shadowrun 5th edition. In Shadowrun, when your character wants to, or when you want your character to do a thing, generally speaking, if it's questionable whether or not that thing would succeed, the game master will call for a skill test. The game master will ask you for a specific skill on your character sheet. You look at it. The game master, generally speaking, will also tell you one of your attributes to go along with that skill. Now, usually most skills have an assigned attribute that goes with it, but not always. I digress. In Shadowrun, you use a dice pool of D6s. You get the first part of your dice pool from your attribute. This is, believe it or not, the more important part. Why, I will get to at the end of this. The second part of your dice pool comes from your skill. The amount of ranks you have in a skill and the number next to your attribute put together determine how many dice you'll be rolling. You might add or take away dice depending on the situation. Your game master will let you know. Then you roll all of those dice. Keep in mind, D6s. Now, in Shadowrun, if you're rolling something you're very good at, it's not uncommon for you to have 15, 16, 17, even 18 or more dice in one dice pool at a time. Especially if you're doing something in, say, combat, where there's likely to be a lot of bonuses being thrown around. So if we're rolling, 10 plus dice, what kind of number are we looking for? Well, in Shadowrun, unlike in Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder, and other traditional games, you aren't looking to combine your dice and add them together and get a specific number. Instead, you count the number of 5s and 6s that you've rolled on the dice. The amount of 5s and 6s you get total is called, are called hits. And you need a certain number of hits to succeed. So usually this threshold will be two successes on the dice. Now, if you roll at least half of your dice as ones, regardless of whether or not you succeed and roll a bunch of successes, you're going to get what's called a glitch, and something bad happens, though not detrimental. If you roll at least half of your dice as ones and you score no successes, that's called a critical glitch, and something detrimentally horrible happens. That's the fun part. I think I got all of it, actually. It's a lot more simple than I thought it would be to explain. But yeah, if you're used to traditional games like, say, Dungeons & Dragons, it's the same concept as a skill check. Right? And if you're used to World of Darkness, in fact, it's pretty much the exact same concept. You're looking for a specific number on the die. That number or higher is your number of successes, and the total number of successes determines whether you succeed or fail at your task. Natural ones are bad. If you roll at least half of your dice pool as ones, glitches happen. If you roll half of your dice pool as ones and you score no successes, a critical glitch happens. Really not that hard. Oh, right, I said that I would tell you why attributes are the more important part of that equation. Sometimes you're not going to have any skill ranks in a given skill. In fact, that's very likely. I can't think of a single character I've ever encountered that had a rank in every single skill, though that would be an interesting concept to play out, a jack of all trades. Anyway, if your game master calls for a skill test and you do not have that skill, this is called defaulting. When you default, you only roll the dice pool given for your attribute and not your attribute plus your skill. What's the big deal? Aren't we just looking for successes here? Well, it is a big deal, because if you default, you take a -1 penalty to your dice pool, in addition to any other penalties or bonuses awarded to you by the GM based on the situation. Right, so we've talked about how skill tests work. We've talked about how defaulting works. I'm sure I'm missing some. Oh, buying hits, right. If you, as the player, are fairly confident that you're going to succeed at what the game master is asking you to do, and you don't feel like risking a glitch in the roll, you can petition your GM to allow you to buy your hits. What does buying hits mean? Well, you take your entire dice pool, divide that by 4, and pretend that's how many successes you got. Your GM is well within their rights to disallow this from happening, but I'd probably allow it the majority of the time, unless like it was a time-sensitive issue or there was some other kind of pressure on the character to perform the skill check immediately. You can think of buying hits like taking 10 or taking 20 in Dungeons and Dragons, right? It should, in theory, be, a simple task, but it might take you longer to do, or otherwise is just so routine a skill roll is not necessarily needed. Now, buying hits is not necessarily success. After all, your dice pool divided by 4 is rarely going to exceed 4 successes, which, granted, 4 successes is a very difficult threshold for a test anyway, but 2 or 3 are somewhere between average and a little difficult, right? So it is very possible that your GM could say no simply because it would be impossible for you to succeed at your given test with 1/4 of your dice as successes. I think I was clear enough, but if I wasn't, let me know. Shadowrun can be a little bit difficult at times, and I don't have any kind of visual aid to help you out with this. So, thank you very much for watching, and before I wish you a great rest of your day, I wanted to try out something new in all my awkward glory. I have filled this giant tub with ideas for what to talk about next. So tomorrow, what can you look forward to? That was a blank one for some reason. I shouldn't be looking in there. What can you look forward to tomorrow? Do. Template analysis. Dresden Files RPG. White Court Vampires. Well, stick around for that if you like Dresden Files. If not, have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you very much for watching, And good luck out there, chummer. Well, that's embarrassing. I missed the stop recording button, and I don't edit these, so